Hello, everyone. I want to do some digestion this morning together, if you don't mind. I've been thinking, actually just kind of laying around last night and sort of contemplating a little bit of the things that we've talked about. One is the Hafiz poem where we emphasized all desires of your body are holy. And we talked about the context and the implications of that and how that can be true without disturbing all notions of all religion everywhere. And the notion of knowing God by the combined love of those three great loves: a child for its mother, a man for his chaste wife, and a rich man's love of his wealth, and kind of the oneness of all things and desire. And so I am going to try and draw something that's sort of happening in my mind, and really I'm giving it to you to think about, to digest about. This isn't really a presentation of absolute truths or anything. It's probably a relative truth at best, and maybe even just a partially digested set of ideas. But I'm going to share them with you, and in the comments, if you have anything you want to add or say about it, that would be great. Now, I'm also in the danger that I'm always in this morning, in that I think there might be way more information here than what 10 or 12 minutes can easily present. So let me get started. We're going to start here on my trusty board with our first big circle. And we're not going to use that marker. Let's try this other blue marker. Nice big circle. And we're going to call that circle the self. All right? Now we all know that the self, we have some characteristics of self. Really, we can't say anything about the self in its absolute, because it's one without a second, and if you don't have a second, there's no one to describe, and there's nothing to compare it to give it attributes. So knowing that the absolute self has no attribute or contains all attributes, both are true, we're just going to go ahead and kind of do what the sages have done. We're going to allow Satchitananda. So we're going to put that in there. We're going to have existence, right? Intelligence, which incidentally I had to look up to see how to spell intelligence. I thought that was ironic. It has two L's, by the way. Probably everybody knows that. Existence, intelligence, and bliss or love. Okay? So those are the characteristics of that. Now, some of the ways that might be, some of the implications of those three qualities would be absolute contentment, right? So there'd be contentment. We're just going to put a C for time's sake. There would be absolute stability, right? Absolute stability. So we'll put a big S for stability, so I don't waste my time writing these things out. And on top of stability, what else would be there? Contentment, stability, oneness, wholeness. So we'll put a big O for oneness, that absolute unification of things. All right, now let's go to the second part. Within the self, within this wholeness, within this Satchitananda, we're going to step down in vibration, as it were. We're going to, solidify a little bit. We're going to take some limitations and restrictions, and we're going to form a mind. Okay? Now, mind is less subtle than the self. Okay, meaning that it's got some shape and form, which means it has some attributes. The attributes of mind we've talked about. It likes to distinguish and categorize, pull things together. But what would be the desires of a mind? You see, a mind is a subset or a limited and restricted model of self as a whole. So it's going to be missing, or have only a portion of itself in there. So for its existence, it's going to feel its existence, of course, but it's going to want a constant reassurance of that existence, So a desire of the mind is for security, right? For stability, which is a reflection, or a less subtle reflection, of these characteristics of contentment, stability, and oneness. It's going to desire name and fame, right? name and fame, because it's going to prop up its sense of existence, going to set up, give it that sense of stability. It's going to increase that sense of oneness, you know, that interrelationship with thing. Relationships is another. Love, you know, between people. It's going to seek out that oneness. It's going to seek out that stability. Money, not money. Money would be probably more, even less than that. But it's going to be looking for power, which is what money is a representation of. It would be seeking out power, right, for that infinite, unchanging, secure self. That again, that contentment, that stability, that security, which are all components of that oneness. So you see that mind being a frozen form of the self within restrictions and limitations, its desires, all of its desires, are going to be locked up in a definition of this oneness that it knows, that it senses, that it has an intuitive sense that it is a part of. So you have that oneness going on here. The mind and its desires are going to be reflective of what it knows itself to be, but cannot express within its set of limitations and restrictions. It cannot properly express infinity or immortality or omnipotence, all powerful. But all of the desires of mind, the subtle desires of yours, belong to categories that point toward the characteristics of yourself. Now, your true self, not the of course, the individuated self, but your universal self, yourself beyond all attribute. All right, and then within the center of the circle, we've got another dead marker. We'll make this one purple, maybe. We'll see. Here it is. Yes. And this is going to, everybody knows what this is going to be. This is going to be body. So body is like the ice cube, right? So the self, we'll say, is like steam. You know, the mind is like water, and the body is like ice. So it's a stepping down of the same thing, the same element, water. You know, the same element, quote, Atman, is here in its steam form, you know, formless, all-pervading, absolute, you know, existing self. The mind is going to be your water, so it still really doesn't have a form as such. It can sort of think of any form, you know, it can contain lots of ideas and whatnot, but its desires are going to belong to this outer realm of the self as a whole. Now, coming down to the body, you're going to find the exact same thing. But the body is a more limited function. It's got more restrictions and more limitations than mind, but all of its desires are going to point to the same area, but they're going to be in the shape of more frozen things, like the desire for money, which is really the desire for power, which is really the desire for security, which is really part of oneness. When there is no second, there is no fear. When there is no sense of other, there is no fear. So all of the desires of your body are going to be reflective of your higher self. The idea for looking for relationships, for sex. So of course, relationships belongs to the mind. That's more of more subtle than a body. The body is actually going to be looking for physical oneness. You know, it's going to be looking for that sexual encounter, that pleasing encounter. You know, which is a reflection of that oneness. A reflection of the two become one, is how the Christian scriptures talk about that relationship. You know, so all of the desires of the body are going to be reflected in the ice cube, in the limitations and restrictions of the body, but they're all going to be a desire that is a subset or points to all of the characteristics that are yours by nature. So you can think of any of them. I mean, we've talked about that name and fame, you know, or would be one. Lust and greed, you know, all of these are subsets. So that's the whole idea that I was looking at. It's kind of not really as complex as I was thinking it was going to be, but this notion that really that is the context for which all of your desires are holy, in the sense that if you come to realize that this outer place here, being what we call God, the self, the Atman, undifferentiated oneness, that all of your desires are going to be for desires, a desire for God. You know, God is what the self looks like from these two limited perspectives, the limited perspective of body and the limited perspective of mind. Now, how you can use this in your daily life for becoming perfect, for attaining that higher consciousness, is to understand that you don't need anything. You don't actually need anything. You are, by nature, this unrestricted, unlimited self, all-pervading. You know, I asked my father one time how the blocks, I was building a big tower with blocks in the playroom, and it fell down, and I noticed that after it fell down, all the blocks stopped. And I asked my dad, I said, how do the blocks know when to stop? How come they just don't kind of just keep falling? You know, once they start falling, why don't they just keep falling? And he says that blocks will fall, anything will fall until it reaches its most stable condition. And, you know, as a kid, I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, wow, that's very interesting. And so you can see that even non-sentient things, in a sense, are also reaching for that same ideal. You know, in a block falling, it knows when to stop because it's reached its stability. It's reached its contentment, you know, as it were. So the way that you can use this, to get back to the point, is to know that you have no desire. And so when you feel a desire, it's up to you then to do some discrimination, some discernment. Is that a desire of the body or is it a desire of mind? Neither of which are you. The body will make all of its requests of the mind. The mind will then make its requests of you as such, you know, you as Atman, through the intercessor, which would be the intellect. But we really, at that level, exactly how all that happens, how does the absolute, undivided, express itself as the restricted limitation of the manifested world? Who knows? Who knows how that happens? But it's good to know that it's the identity when the self identifies with the mind, when it says, I am the mind, this is me in my mind, then you're concerned about the desires of mind and you want to fulfill them because you see them as being your own desires. But they are not your desires. They are the instability and the fluctuation of the mind, which is trying to find you, trying to find what you are. And then the same with the body. If you find that one of your desires belongs to the body and it's making a request of the mind, it's the identity of yourself with your particular body that makes you think that's my desire, and that's what gives you the need to fulfill it. That's why, I better take care of that because that's me that wants that. I want that. But it's not you who wants that. It's the body who wants that. And so if you are able to distinguish these three components of your experience, these three components to your daily life, then you can know what belongs to the body, and you can decide, is that good for my body, not good for my body? Is that right for my body, not right for my body? Is it dharmic or adharmic? That's really the Vedantic phrasing of it. And when you get a desire of the mind, you can think, okay, that's a desire for that mind. Is it good for that mind? Does it meet the goals that I know are true? Does it bring it toward oneness? Does it actually, can I fulfill it just by knowing my oneness, by having faith in my oneness? Because you can't feel this outer circle, the self. You can't feel it because the feeling requires two. You know, the body can sense it. When you think of love, you feel it in the heart. But that's not the thing itself. You know, that's an indication of the thing. And so all of your desires that come from the body or from the mind, you should understand that they are actually pointers or indicators of your higher self. And you can use them to remind yourself of the higher self and not enslave yourself to them by thinking that they belong to you and that they are your desires. That's the attachment. That's the confusion that is causing us so much trouble, is not being able to distinguish the source of our desires and not being able to distinguish the nature of our desires, which is for that oneness, which we already have, which is inherent in us, cannot be felt, cannot be thought of. Those are only reflections within it. It's an isness that can only be intuited at our level, just be intuited. So think about those things today. Do you agree with it? Does it sound right to you? How can you use it? Take that experiment and run with it. And if you get anywhere or have anything to add or any questions, put them in comments. Until then, Enjoy your life, look to God, and be happy.